Katrin, thank you so much for being here with us.
Thank you so much, Laura. Thank you, Lulu, for creating this space. I love that
Yes,
we're
amazing.
opening the conversation for the sex ed that we didn't get in high school, because that is very much a massive black hole void that we need to fill.
absolutely,
100%.
absolutely.
Yeah.
More big, it gets
So,
more bigger every day too.
Yeah.
so to get us started, could you tell us a bit more about yourself and how you created Katrin with Love?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, where do I start? There's so many pieces of our stories and really our common story. And I really hope that people listening can relate to pieces of this and finally feel a bit less alone in this struggle, this private struggle that vaginismus is. But my mission has been lately to bring it into the public eye. So my story has a lot to do with this private pain that I had tried to sweep under the rug for most of my life. I grew up in a bit of a, logic centric, left brain focused kind of family where what made you valuable in the world was to get the good grades, to get involved in school, right? To be that good girl, to be the good daughter. And with that, alongside our missing sex education, there was this unfamiliarity with my own sexual energy. And since I mentioned the good girl just now, there was this need to prove myself, to put my head down in the books, to make sure everything is in control in my life, et cetera, and to create a corporate career that would make my father proud, quite
Mhm.
honestly. And so when I first tried to have penetrative sex with my boyfriend at the time, which was at 18 years of age, what I experienced was the brick wall. Where the vaginal opening is and should be, but really I had myself doubting that it's there. I had this closing, the Great Wall of Vagina, as I've heard it be referred to, that just shut my partner off and out. I mean, not shut him off, but it shut him out physically from my body. Now, I wanted to have penetrative sex. My sexual desire was very much there. I trusted him. I loved him, right? I could not notice a single logical reason why my body would be saying no. But that's exactly what it was doing. It was simply saying no for me. So that's kind of the start of this entire journey. And the reason why our Vaginismus Sisters community exists right now is because with all the dead ends and the late night Google searches that I was doing, I finally came across this term, vaginismus. And it's referred to as a sexual dysfunction in our society still today, which I'm trying to change. But it is something that so many of us face in isolation and we don't really talk about, because I found very little information back in the day.
Mm.
So that's where I'll leave it for now. Where do we want to go next?
So what would go next is, told us a little bit about it, but why do you feel it's so important continuing to spread this awareness about what's going on? You mentioned that, a lot of people don't know about it, and which is true. We had to go on and do our own research because it is something that's not, spoken about, and those things. What are your short-term and long-term efforts that you're doing to now spread awareness about it?
Yeah, that's a great question, Lulu. And I think the reasoning that kind of covers the why question is the pain, is the pain that we're going through. And not only the physical parts of what this, that I like to refer to as a protective body response creates, because that physical pain for me felt like someone had warmed a knife over the fire until it's nice and burning orange, and then very slowly and mindfully tried to insert that inside my body in the most sensitive space of my vagina.
Mm.
And so that physical pain is just excruciating, and it has so many emotional ripple effects. We as women start to disconnect from this idea of what it is to be a woman, a vagina owner, from our sensual and sexual energy that typically creates the sense of aliveness and excitement for life, excitement for relationships, our confidence with our bodies. all of that becomes this distant idea because we start to repress and we start to almost resent the idea of being a woman, because our vagina has brought us so much disappointment and frustration and confusion. And no medical professional out there, though there are a lot more now, but that was just my experience back in the day, seemed to know how to help me with this. And that's the common story of so many Vaginismus sisters. So part of the emotional pain is this idea of losing ourselves as women in the world, also potentially not feeling comfortable enough to enter the dating space or to look for a long-term partner, to even feel deserving of a relationship. And on a body level, to feel deserving of pleasure. The other piece that connects to this is our relationship to rest and nourishment and really our own self-care. Mm-hmm. And I think, and let me know if you can relate to this, but we haven't really been taught in our society to prioritize ourselves, right? The to-do list, it's got all these other productive things on it, but not so much take a break, relax, right? Take care of yourself. Mm-hmm. You relate to that part of our existence?
Yeah.
100%. Yeah.
And so that's kind of the why behind this movement of claiming our sexual liberation again. And some of the practical components of what that looks like, since you asked, of course, involves creating a community for Vaginismus Sisters where we can all gather, share, celebrate each other, and support each other, and have support from someone who has walked the walk. And there are a handful of these women who are spreading the word online. Mm-hmm. And then beyond that, how can we actually improve our sex education experience, right? Not only in schools, but as parents, if we want to be parents, to be able to help heal the generational trauma that gets passed down.
Right.
And that's putting out those fires that were started so many years ago that we do have the responsibility to kind of douse and change the name of the game with how we raise our kids. So that's the goal.
Yeah, I mean, that's a very powerful answer, as, we're all here as vulva owners. And for me, to have children and to be talking about that, you just never know when those things may happen or who it may happen to. So be able to have the conversation and know that you're not on an island alone, it's very comforting, because a lot of times we do feel like, oh, it's only happening to us. There cannot be anyone else that this thing is happening to. And I commend you and your group and all the people who will come after to be involved, because it's very needed. It's so hard to sometimes think that you're somewhere by yourself. So, I commend you for being vulnerable enough to speak about your own journey and to be able to be a voice and a support for others in theirs.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I love that you mentioned vulnerability, because that's where so much of our strength lies. When we choose to open ourselves up, open our heart, share our story with others who finally understand, right? We find that strength in vulnerability, and we find a strength in the softness that it requires to be vulnerable. And it really is only in community that we can, quote unquote, heal rather than in isolation. But I mentioned healing. I'm starting to break up from the word healing, because I don't quite feel like it served me for a large part of my journey, but I don't really feel like we have healing to do. We are already whole and complete. It's just about uncovering who we truly are by shedding the layers of who we aren't and who society has taught us to believe that we are, and how we should behave, et cetera, et cetera. So that healing piece is kind of an interesting relationship or journey that I've had with it.
Yeah, I really love how you're talking about this, and how it's about, you already are complete. This isn't something that has to define you or define entirely your whole sexuality. You are a complete person, but now you want to go deeper and uncover some of the things that are, just further getting at that deeper core of who you are. I think that's really lovely. And it actually kind of relates to our next question. What are some of the misconceptions that people have about vaginismus, and how can they get help for that particular condition?
Yeah, great question. The misconceptions are so many. One of the biggest misconceptions is that vaginismus is, first of all, sexual dysfunction. And the reason why I bring attention to this is that as soon as we start to believe that we have a sexual dysfunction, we actually start to take on the identity that we are dysfunctional. And that is a very disempowering place to be. And so being dysfunctional is the worst place that we can approach vaginismus from, because we're already at this place of I'm broken, I need fixing, and that goes deep. So that's one of the biggest misconceptions, and hence I refer to vaginismus as a protective body response instead. It's a protective body response because we've experienced pain. We are anticipating pain, hence we're kind of bracing for pain, and we're tightening because we want to protect ourselves from pain. So this protective response is simply active in our bodies right now. And the idea is to find a way to deactivate it. Hence, we're not experiencing it forever. It's not part of our identity. It is a short-term thing that we're simply experiencing right now. And I think that reframe is a really empowering one.
Yeah.
Now, another misconception is that vaginismus, because it seems like a physical mechanism, that it is only a physical experience and its causes are only physical. Mm-hmm. And yeah, it is true that really painful pelvic exams could have created this notion and this association that any sort of penetration is going to be painful in the future, or a painful attempt at inserting a tampon. Of course, there are a lot more traumatic reasons that this may have happened, including sexual abuse. And still, there are a lot of other emotional and mental contributions to this piece. Now, not that the physical pain is in our head, right? That's not what we're saying, because it's very real. And still, we may have had vaginismus kind of come online because we have kind of found in our lives that having control over things is a really good survival strategy. For example, when I experienced some chaotic things in my household when I was younger, what did I do? Well, I found safety in putting my head down in the books, having control over my grades and what I could focus on in my schooling so that I don't have to pay attention to what was going on that was so chaotic otherwise. And so this contribution to having found the survival strategy of being in control of things, now considering we are laying in bed and we are asked to use a whole different approach to what penetrative sex is all about, which is actually surrendering to another human being, right? It's like the most vulnerable thing we could do as vagina owners is let another person inside of us. Naturally, our lived and learned practice of being in control of things doesn't quite fit. And so life is asking us to find safety and surrender, to find safety and openness. So though there's so many physical components to it, there are psychological, emotional, mental ideas to explore so that first we can understand ourselves better, we can understand what's happening to our bodies, and we can kind of backtrack and note down all the possible causes that we want to process in order to start to find that relaxation, that openness, and that safety and surrender within ourselves. So that's one other big misconception. It's not only physical.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that makes a lot of sense, especially because we are taught that sex is such a physical thing, or it only is physical. It doesn't matter about what's going on up here, and it takes growth and experience and reading people who actually know what they're talking about to learn that the mental component of that is just as important as physical. And I like that you also emphasize that the pain is not just in our heads too, because women's experiences going to the doctor, or people's with vulvas experiences going to the doctor, they're always told that the pain is in your head. It's not it's not real or it's downplayed, and so it makes getting diagnosed for various issues really, really hard. So it's I like that you're reinforcing and validating people's experiences with this, and um by having the community that you've created, it's again just allowing people to realize, no, this is something that is real, that's happening to me, others are experiencing it, and it just feels very supportive. So I really like that.
Thank you.
I agree.
Appreciate that.
Because yeah, and then societal wise, right? They're like, oh, you can unthink about it. You can let it go. No, this is a full thing that's happening, mind and body. So how can you just be so you can just let it go, or even the thought of it triggering you to even be having to have the conversation with your spouse, with your parent, with your doctor, to understand what's even happening. So all of those things, the mental anguish that it would give you to even think about having the conversation, how that's going to react to you as a whole is, it's jarring. It's a lot. And flight or flight comes into response there, and you can see that in the body, right? So yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Absolutely.
Yeah, it takes a lot of courage for us to gather everything we need in terms of our inner world to be like, yeah, I deserve to get support with this, and it's time, and I get to take up space by advocating for myself in the doctor's office. But the disappointing thing is that what we often get is not a very helpful first attempt at seeking help. Now, seeking help for a lot of women is already very hard because we try to be the Miss Independent to take care of everyone and nourish everyone. And then you are just told to have a glass of wine and relax. That is what my doctor told me. And I even was 18 years old at the time, and here in Canada, that is not legal drinking age. So I was given the alcohol prescription illegally from a doctor in this like laissez-faire, like, yeah, just learn to relax. That's all you need. I was also told that my body must not like be ready yet. That's just simply what it is. So I should just wait, which was not a very helpful recommendation. And I heard more awful ones, including, a doctor looking in a woman's eyes and asking, do you even love your husband?
Oh.
So it's redonkulous what goes on. And, thankfully these days we have better and better. And of course you can get lucky or unlucky, but hopefully we have better support systems. And I guess part of the explanation there is that so many medical professionals, just as we were, grew up in a shame-steeped culture around sex and pleasure. Mm-hmm. And we, therefore, in our medical communities and that traditional approach, we don't incorporate this second pillar of what I call the second pillar of putting vaginismus in the past, which is all about our eroticism. It's about pleasure. It's about discovering our authentic sexual selves. And that conversation is so often missing in these traditional approaches to tackling vaginismus just physically, let's say by stretching out your muscles.
Right.
Now, Lulu, another thing you mentioned that I loved, and I just want to comment on this, is the fight, flight, freeze response and like the fawn response. And vaginismus is the freeze response. Mm-hmm. We freeze in this survival state, and hence working with our nervous system in order to down-regulate it enough so that we can access that level of safety and relaxation in our body is an absolute must. And again, that's part of the holistic approach that's really important to consider.
Yeah, I mean, when I hear it, all the massage therapist in me comes out. That's my other. So as soon as I hear things like that, that's all I think about is, your body's like, oh no, something's happening. We have to protect. It's all about the protection in that space. What the doctor's response is it hurt me because it's like, you're going to these people that are supposed to take it amongst themselves to have that thing called continuing education. Okay, you have your basics, but you still have to be learning because we don't know who's going to walk through our door. Laura and I are continuously learning every day. We're learning in abundance in this conversation because we can't help others continuously if we're not doing the work. So I feel like especially if you know it's a GYN, the work you continuously have to happen. You don't know what's going to come through your door when someone comes, and you have to at least say, you know what, it sounds familiar, but I don't know all of it. Not give you excuses, oh, you should be drunk so you can relax yourself, or you don't love someone. That's the most asinine thing I've ever heard in my life, and it just seriously infuriates me. For myself, for women, vulva owners underneath me, for my own child who's, a female, like those things are very jarring that you feel like you just need to make sure they have every information possible to make sure they know how to advocate properly for themselves.
Yeah. And the funny thing about the alcohol or like the drug recommendation is that, I remember thinking in my mind, you don't think I tried that already? Like, yes, I have been blackout drunk trying to have penetrative sex with my partner who I wanted to satisfy so much. And I thought this was the only way. And we really do go to great lengths to try to, in a way, coming back to like proving our worth as women and as girlfriends. Mm-hmm. And back in that first relationship, which was such a beautiful beginning, right? Ideally to intimacy and to connection, right. I felt like an awful girlfriend. And I remember trying to convince my partner at the time multiple times over to maybe go find someone else so he can enjoy a sex life in his early 20s. So it really takes a toll on your sense of self, your confidence, and what you feel like you deserve or don't deserve.
Absolutely. And I feel like this is so important, especially for young women, because at 18, being able to go to your doctor and advocate and try to advocate for yourself is so intimidating because, yeah, on paper you're an adult, but like you're against this authority figure that is supposed to know everything about everything in regards to health. And so for them to just totally downplay your experience, to just, oh yeah, get drunk, is like, it's so frustrating. And then how does that, it doesn't help you don't know where else to go for information. And so again, like the fact that you've established this community, I can just see how it's going to help and has helped so many women find all the information that they need, so that if they can go back to their doctor, they can say, no, here is what is happening to me and I need you to follow this or look into this. I think that's just it's a kind of advocacy that is just really important, and I feel like it's just empowering women to take their bodies back, to be in control of their health, and hopefully it can lead to more change within the medical community for doctors to be educated about these more, and vaginismus isn't, I wouldn't even say it's more niche, like it is a widespread thing that women experience, even if it's temporary. So there needs to be more information and more compassion for people going through this. That, yeah, it's really just a shame is probably not exactly the right word that I'm looking for, but it's I guess I should say it's shameful that the medical community has those responses to people who are going through this, because it just makes it so hard to find the help that you need.
Absolutely. Yeah.
You mentioned educating our medical professionals, which is kind of funny, right? But it is what we find ourselves doing. And in a way, we can look at the empowering part of that equation to see it as, well, yeah, our health is our own at the end of the day. And once we can kind of pause from outsourcing our responsibility for our health to other people, we actually find so much more that's available out there with alternative holistic medicine, massage therapy being a really big part of what we can do to love our bodies, and all of these different puzzle pieces that I believe we're actually meant to follow the breadcrumb trail to find. And that's part of this journey to liberation, to freedom within our own lives, and creating a life by our own design rather than living a life by default. That's kind of led by some of the groups of power, especially when we kind of take a hands-off approach and say, you know, I will live my life according to the standard default scenario rather than create a beautiful, nourishing sex life, relationship, career for myself. So I think that this journey has so many beautiful ripple effects on how we get to experience ourselves as humans in the world, because we realize, okay, no one out there has all the answers. I get to find these within myself, and I feel like such a more powerful woman as a result of it.
That's powerful. And that really leads into our next question. What does it mean for you to be sexually liberated, and how can we embody being sexually liberated in love?
Oh, this is such a big question. So for me, what it means to be sexually liberated is very much about feeling at home in our bodies as this like vehicle for all of life's experiences. And of course, pleasure is a really big part of that. And we can access a full out experience of multiple orgasms and all of these pieces on that side of the spectrum. But we also look to some of the more subtle pleasures, like being able to walk outside and feel the sensation of the wind against our cheeks or the sun against our skin, and to experience the bliss in that, which I feel like is a really beautiful initial part of our erotic awakening, our awakening to all of the pleasures that our five senses can provide us. Mm-hmm. And then when we look away from the pleasure piece, which of course is the glamorized part of what this is all about, I do think that sexual liberation also has a lot to do with being able to feel it all on the other side of the spectrum, which is the pain, which is part of our human experience. And to be able to kind of experience the fullness of not physical pain, because we don't want to be tolerating that, but some of the emotions in life that we often suppress as humans, that we don't want to feel, like the grief we may have experienced in life, the sadness, the anger that can actually be a really beautiful, potent source of like power and dedication and resilience and commitment to whatever we decide to commit to. But like all of these also have their own gifts. However, when we suppress those or we choose not to feel them subconsciously or consciously, we kind of create a numbed out state that not only impacts the pain part of this like giant circle, but also the pleasure part. In my experience, if we have our capacity to feel on this spectrum to be quite small, that circle can only touch a little bit of the pleasure and a little bit of the pain, where of course it starts with, well, I don't want to feel the pain, so I'm going to decrease my capacity to feel. Guess what? That has a negative effect on the pleasure side also. So our sexual liberation has a lot to do with being able to expand our capacity to feel so we can encompass more of the intense emotions that aren't always pleasant, but also we can then access this beautiful bliss, like love, openness, surrender on this side of the journey too. And I think that is a lot of what our human awakening, erotically or otherwise, whatever path we kind of take it on, is all about. And hence it's a freedom of feeling and also a freedom of expression that comes from that, because we can't really truly feel if we don't allow ourselves to express the experience of that, like the product of those sensations. That's kind of the base principle of it. There's a lot more to it as well.
Of course, yeah.
What it means for you. What would you add to that?
Oh. Well, I'm big on communication. So for me to be able to communicate what it is that you want or maybe don't want, or what it is that you may be expecting, and to be heard, right? And also, and always a work in progress, right? To be able to hear what the other person may be trying to express, because I feel like you can't feel liberated in something in yourself if you're not open to let someone else express their liberation towards you.
I love
that exchange of things, it's like saying, okay, don't do this, but I see you doing it, but I'm telling you not to. Like, we can't, it's not going to work in that thing because it's not authentic. We're not fully giving to the full experience. So I feel like that's what it would be for me, because once we have communication, we can have a lot of stuff. But
Mm-hmm.
once that block is up, it's very hard. It's difficult, and it can bring a lot of uncertainties, unwanted things, because we're just not being in a space of truth, being in a space of openness, and that thing that no one really likes to do, vulnerability. We're afraid of it. It just happens, for whatever the reason is, our programming from life, or, just however it may surface. But sometimes we got to knock down those doors for that part, I think. And that's the big liberating part when you can do that.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it'll be for me.
What I heard there was this emphasis on authenticity and like communication of truth. I think when we learn in our lives, of course, due to the conditioning, like we mentioned, to be someone we're not, because we're wearing these masks, these layers of who we think we should be in order to please, right? And a lot of our fellow Vaginismus sisters, including myself, are trained people pleasers. We lose ourselves. And so, like you said, it's that coming back to our truth and being able to be authentic and to communicate that authenticity without feeling like we need to hide away. That's huge. How about for you,
We
Laura?
didn't forget about you, Laura. You're always trying to hide.
I know. Yeah, gosh, there's just so much to sit with, and I love that you were talking about feeling the full kind of breadth of emotions. I think for me, being sexually liberated has a lot to do with acceptance. So kind of going off on what you were talking about of feeling at home in your body, accepting your sexual journey for where it is and not comparing it to others, not having to exist on someone else's timeline, um, and not comparing yourself and your journey to any other person, because it can make you feel like either you're too ahead or you're too behind, and just completely discomforted with where you are. And so accepting your pleasure, embracing your pleasure, and allowing your journey to unfold as it naturally is, uh, for me is where that liberation comes from. But I also think, it's going to include, as you were talking about, increasing your capacity to just experience emotion. We, especially in like Western culture, we tend to suppress a lot of our emotions. You don't want to be too excited, you don't want to be too angry, but kind of just feeling where you are, I think, is really important. And then with what Lulu was talking about, having that freedom to communicate but also receive information from your partner, like all of that gets mixed up into it. Yeah.
That's beautiful. Comparison really is the thief of all joy, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
When we feel like we are always trying to close the gap between ourselves and someone else to be more like them, or then to be like more like someone else, again, we lose ourselves. And there was a big part of my life where I was always striving, right? Like striving to get to somewhere else. And that is, again, this future paced idea of what success or joy or happiness looks like that I didn't have access to. So I always thought I need to be elsewhere. And so, just like you said, right, it's this sexual liberation is being able to, well, Lulu, you said it about authenticity and truth, but in this case, also acceptance of who you truly are. And I think so many of our wounds in our society for any human are either more so that they can resonate with not being enough, or they resonate with being too much. So like, don't be too excited. Don't be too loud at the dinner table. Like, oh, make sure you XYZ, or not enoughness. So we can relate to both of these pieces, I think, but we often lean more so on one side. And the journey of acceptance is relevant for both of those. So I love that response.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think we talk about that all the time here. Like, we're doing this work that is so important. And it's really, it is important as a massive, but we're not animated enough. So it's not
Mhm.
reaching
Oh.
enough, in quotations, people that it should. But it's going to reach who it needs to. And then they will share and share and share and share. So I don't think we need to get there fast. Slow and steady wins the race. And I think that all ties into what's happening here. We were slow and steady, and we continue to do our work, and we were able to meet, an amazing person like yourself, to be able to now learn more for ourselves, that we can have further conversations and keep this conversation going. We don't know who we're going to meet in transition that may be going through the same thing. And now we're able to say, hey, listen, I might have a tribe for you that, may fit into what you need to be looking for, and be able to advocate and share that information that you have now shared with us. So I just think it's really amazing, and it fills my cup every week that we're on, and be able to do what we're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and again, this kind of leads into the next question that we have for you. Where do you see people struggle the most with their sexuality?
What comes up to share, and I don't know if, there is really no right answer with the most, but what comes up to share is around our exploration of our eroticism. And by that, I mean that we have grown up with these ideas of what sex needs to look like. And oftentimes we also have this notion of, first time sex is going to hurt, which of course is referring to penetrative sex. But even that, the definition of sex, we have this notion that that is the only type of sex. And of course, penetrative sex is a beautiful part that you can put on the sex menu, but there's also so much more. And specifically, we have this notion that it involves, speed, it involves penis and vagina. The goal is the orgasm, that direct notion of like, oh, yeah, nakedness is the thing that creates turn on, or fast touch, or whatever else. And a lot of what I just explained fits into this one piece, erotic language, or as the sexologist Jaya has named it, an erotic blueprint titled The Sexual Erotic Blueprint. That's one of 5 erotic blueprints. There's the energetic, there's the sensual, there's the kinky, there's the shapeshifter, and there's the sexual. But we kind of compare ourselves again to this idea of what the sexual is, because we see that so much in our media, that we don't realize that our nervous system may not be wired in that same way that we're expecting ourselves to perform in the bedroom. For example, for me, if my genitals were touched too early in an intimate encounter, I would have the sensation of like this zinging sensation, almost like wanting to contract back, knowing for myself, or at least not yet consciously knowing at the time, but now knowing that that was too early. And that I craved, first of all, more teasing, more erotic connection, right? That foreplay that we label as foreplay, but really is sex. It is sex. That is just of a different flavor of turn on. And my nervous system is wired in a certain way. Now, of course, that wiring can evolve, and we can start to tap into different erotic languages and kind of expand our sex menu, but we also don't need to. That is not better than playing in a single erotic language that just feels right. And a lot of our fellow Vaginismus sisters are of different erotic languages. Once we start to realize that and actually explore the gifts that each of those bring, of course, they bring shadows too, as Jaya speaks to, but the superpowers in those, seeing them, honoring them, celebrating them, and being like, yeah, I get to engage with my body in this way. And holy shit, I thought I did not have a lot of pleasure potential. Like I was just an asexual being. But wait a second, I have just unlocked this world of possibility of what does really truly feel like turn on in my system that I could not reach before. And that is such a big milestone for the journey. So it's that erotic piece. I feel like that is a big one to respond to your question.
Like it. I'm liking it. An extended time of foreplay. That's yes. Just do that maybe. Right. Sometimes you don't need penetration. Just do that. It can get you, to your point. If more people really tapped in, to what their body is really yelling at them. Sometimes they're just really ignoring it. You can have an amazing sensual experience with no penetration at all and have the most explosive, mind-blowing time of your life compared to you having penetrated sex and be like, okay, thanks.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I guess so. Just being able to be more focused in your body, not worrying about all this outside noise, like really listening to what the body is saying and we're like, hey, we need more of that because we're not ready. It's not ready. You made the point perfectly. Sometimes your mind is like, yeah, we're totally into this. And, the rest of the body's like, no, 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 no. Mm-mm. We need a little bit more. We're not fully there yet. And then, things happen, a blockage. It's not happening. Or, a lot of pain. So now you have pain after. So then you have this other thing. And now you're getting micro tears and all these things happening because you were not fully listening to what your body was yelling, screaming, demanding of you to get more of. I think if nothing else, people just need to really listen to themselves because someone else can't give it to us if we're not hearing what our body's saying to ourselves. How can we now express that to someone else? It's powerful. It's powerful stuff. I appreciate you saying that. It's wonderful.
In the context of vaginismus, this listening piece really goes so far. And I like to explain this little example when it comes to the dilating journey, which is that penetrative practice that we get to choose to explore when we're ready. And it's this, right? If we imagine our vagina that is experiencing vaginismus is kind of taking on this responsibility of saying no, because we didn't listen to it for long enough that it decided, right? Like, well, Katrin's not taking care of me, so I better do this on my own. Like, I'm going to tighten and brace and say no in the way that I know how, because she is not using her voice. But once we start to listen and to take back that responsibility of our no, using our voice, and start to care for, right, our body in total, and of course also our vulva and vagina, that vagina is going to look up at us and she's going to say, well, something's different. She is saying no for us. She's noticing that we are a no right now. She's using her voice to speak that truth. And guess what? Now I can feel like I can lean back and relax a little bit, says the vagina, because I don't have to carry this burden anymore. I don't have to carry this weight. And that creates a spaciousness for the yeses to come alive, because the no is now taken care of. And when we're no, great, Katrin's got it. But when we're a yes, well, she's going to start to tell me through physical sensation, like, oh, give me more. I like that. So we create this openness. We create this space for her then to be able to access her sexual desire, which is the thing that a lot of us think that we lose, and we think we lose permanently. I very much had my sex drive go down, right? Our desire. I started to avoid kissing, other forms of sex, even hugging and holding my partner's hand, because I was dreading where that could lead. And that is another really big part of our disconnection, not only from ourselves and our own erotic desires, but from our partners, because we don't want to face the disappointment, the frustration that lays on the other side of any form of intimacy. So we're like, okay, let's not go there at all. And then we become roommates in our relationship. And that's also not the most fulfilling way to be. Of course, if you desire that, that's perfect. We're not yucking each other's yum. And I know that a lot of our Vaginismus sisters in our community are craving more.
I think that's powerful. I think that's a powerful place for us to really close in with our conversation, because I think that this is something that we can just have in part 2 and part 3 and really, bring so much more awareness to this topic. But I think, with us building our foundation, this has been a 2-tier, 2-floor of our high rise that we're building here today to help people really start the conversation, maybe have an aha moment about themselves on a personal journey they didn't even know they were on, and to really grow and see where this can help themselves or someone else, and just have those conversations about this, unfortunate but fortunate thing that's happening in life that you will be able to experience. Maybe this is, like you're saying, calling out for you to pay more attention to yourself.
I would never want to re-experience vaginismus, but
Oh
I
no, yeah,
do say that I am grateful. And a lot of women who kind of claim their freedom in this way look back and say, wow, I don't know if I would have ever gone this deep if I hadn't been experiencing these challenges. And now that I have gone deep, I am glad that I got to explore myself in these ways that I wouldn't have otherwise. So it's a way of a blessing in disguise.
Yeah, sometimes that trauma becomes something, a beautiful rainbow. You know, fortunately, unfortunately, sometimes. But you know, if you're able to receive the journey, look at the wonderfulness you get on the other side. Here you are with us having an amazing conversation.
Absolutely. And again, you know, the community that you're building, helping people with vulvas find these resources, find connection with other people who are going through the same thing, it all allows, you know, them to take their power back and to fully explore you know, the variety of pleasure that they can experience. So again, the work you're doing is just incredibly important, and we are so thankful that we get a chance to learn more about everything from you. So thank you so much for being here with us.
You're very welcome. Thank you for the work that you do, for the space you've created, and for these conversations. They're so, so valuable. So I'm grateful.
Absolutely.
Wonderful.
So let our audience know where they can follow you, where they can, ask whatever they need to ask or be a part of the community if they desire or feel they need to be a part of the sisterhood. Let them know where they can find you.
Yeah, a beautiful place is on Instagram at vaginismus.sisters, and also on my website, katrinwithlove.com, which has a beautiful space dedicated to our vaginismus community. On there are free resources. So one such resource is Katrin's recipe from pain to confidence, because we all desire that hope and confidence, especially at the start of the journey. And we also have a free Facebook group. So those are beautiful places to plug into.
Okay. And those will all be in our show notes, everyone. We appreciate you guys.
Yeah. All right, everyone. So that's all for this episode of Mindful Sex Ed. Thank you so much for joining us. If you have a question that you'd like us to answer, please email us at luluandlauramsc@gmail.com, or you can reach out to us on social media. You can follow us on Twitter at Mindful Sex Ed Pod, and on Instagram at Mindful Sex Ed Podcast, and on our backup account on Instagram at MSE Podcast.
And if you like what you hear, please rate, review, and subscribe to our podcast wherever you're listening. Reviews on Apple Podcasts and Spotify are particularly helpful in getting us out there.
And on Spotify, it takes just 2 seconds. Click that 5-star rating and leave a comment about what you liked about the episode. Rating us on Spotify and on these other platforms will help us in the rankings and helps us with other opportunities. Sharing is caring.
And it's absolutely free. So please send this episode to a friend, a foe, anyone else that you want to send it to. We appreciate it.
100%. And lastly, thank you all for listening. Again, Katrin, thank you so much for being here. And goodbye, everyone. We will see you next week.